Hello, my name is Ken Garris and I'm the lead engineer for Occasions Music and BizTech Business Technology Solutions. In this video, I'm going to talk about your X10 communication problems, particularly two items which will probably fix all of your problems. One is the repeater called the Cr134 or Cr234, and the second unit you probably don't need is the AT004. We're going to discuss them both, but primarily we're going to be discussing this repeater. I'm going to go over everything there is to know about this repeater as it will probably apply to most people, which would be you. It is the most sophisticated repeater, I believe, on the market that's ever been designed for X10. It's made by the AT Corporation. It's just fabulous unit. I'm going to go over how to install this unit, how to use the dip switches in the unit. It's great because it comes out of the box as is. You can install it in your home and it'll work, but it allows you to tweak a variety of things, a host of things. We use these actually in shopping mall installations. So if you're wondering if it's going to solve your problems, keep in mind we put these in shopping malls. So all kinds of different tips and tricks I'm going to give you in the video. But first I'd like to talk about these units and what makes them so special, okay? So first let's go ahead and talk about the actual unit that we have here. The unit itself is quite attractive. This is the front of the unit right here. You can see it has 5 LEDs on it. And the 5 LEDs I put up here on the board for us. The power LED is lit when the unit's on, and ready, of course, is when the microprocessor is ready. So generally power comes on and ready comes on immediately. Now, as most of you know, according to the X10 protocol, you need 100 millivolts of signal. According to the X10 protocol, that's how much signal has to be on the line for an appliance module or a lamp module to receive and work properly. Now, the newer units, some of the two-way ones, I should say newer than the originals, only require 50 millivolts to work. This unit will receive down to 25 millivolts. So even if you only have 25 millivolts on the line, this repeater will pick it up and repeat it and send it out on the line over both phases or 3 phases. If you're using 3 phases, it works with 3 phases as well, at 5,000 millivolts. From 25 millivolts up to 5,000 millivolts. It does a spectacular job doing that. If you use repeaters in the past, you may be a little biased to thinking, oh, I don't want a repeater, there's going to be a delay, dim and bright don't work. There's a host of other repeaters on the market that you're going to have all kinds of problems with. I've tried everything over the years. This is the common repeater that's being sold right now. You can buy everywhere. It's about $89. You're probably familiar with it. If you're not, I'm sure you can look online and you can find it. This is the repeater that's being sold mostly for X10. I don't like it. Does it work? Sure, it works. But there's all kinds of little issues that we have had with them. Some of the biggest issues is with the dim and bright commands, just by the nature of how X10 works. And I think I'm going to go into that a little bit later in the video, but so those of you that just want to find out how to use this unit, don't get bored, I want to cover this first. I want to go over all the stuff that applies to this. So this particular unit right here, let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, let's go over these lights. The moment that the X10 signal, oh, I know what I wanted to mention first. As I told you, it only has to see a signal down to 25 millivolts on the line. But what some of you don't know is in the United States, just the noise, the background noise on your line is between 10 and 25 millivolts. That's the norm. So the nice thing about the ACT technology, one of the things that I love about this company is that most X10 devices look for the noise level and then it makes that a baseline and then it looks for the X10 signal to be above it. ACT doesn't do that. These receivers and all the stuff that the ACT Corporation makes, what's great about it is it has a complicated algorithm that actually looks for the signal in the level of the noise. So even if your noise level is at 25 millivolts and you have a signal there, it's very good at picking those things out and then amplifying them again. And it does it so fast, there literally is no perceived delay. If I have my repeater on, I hit A1 on and I'm holding the dim button down, it works just like it wasn't there. Now with other units, there is a delay. And by the way, I tried all of them. I installed these things. A lot of you are familiar with this one. This is the Smart Homes dryer pass-through repeater. It's nice because you don't got to do any wiring. You just unplug the dryer, plug it in, and plug the dryer back in here, and it repeats, and it has send and receive on it. Does it work? Sure, it works, but nothing like this one. You get this one, and it works for a while, and pretty soon you got to upgrade, and this isn't upgradable. You just can't do it. Again, I've done everything over the years. Now, what's the difference between a repeater, a coupler? Everybody's heard the term of couplers, and then amplifiers. Well, amplifiers aren't really, there are some amplifiers out there, like the ACT Cr134 but the easiest thing, this is what's in a lot of the couplers. It's just a simple capacitor. All it's in some of the couplers is just a capacitor. Now the capacitor lets everything flow. But you can take this and just put it across both phases. You're not supposed to put it in your breaker box, but of course that's what everybody does. Right across two phases, your transmitter's on one, and just put this in the phase next to it. This will allow the signal that you're transmitting to be split and go over to the other phase in your house, and it's a real cheap way to do it. Now keep in mind, you got to have at least a 250 volt cap. Don't stick 120 volt in there because you're going across two legs. But the problem with using just a cap is, aside from it being a weak signal, because you're not making anything new, you're just splitting what's originally is there, but you're also inverting the signal on the other phase. So 240 volt devices cancel it out. If you have any 240 volt receivers, X10, they wouldn't even work. But not getting too complicated, this solves everything. If you use this repeater, the Cr134, it solves all the problems. Let's go back here real quick. You can tell I didn't plan out what I was going to say before I made the video. These are the LEDs on the front. The moment that you hit an A1 or any kind of button that transmits in the house and this thing sees the signal, the receive light lights. And then you'll see immediately the transmitter light. It sends the new one out. And I mean immediately. There is no perceived delay when you're operating this thing, none whatsoever. Now what's the error light for? Because it's not explained in the documentation. If the unit sees what it believes to be an X10 signal is coming in, it sees it coming in on the line, and then after it's there, it doesn't quite get the finish. So it's not a valid X10. It won't retransmit it, but the error light comes on for 5 seconds to let you know that there's a problem with noise on the line. It can't quite make it out. If the error light never goes out, it means you have continuous noise on the line, because it would stay on 5 seconds each time. So every time it encounters the noise, it sees the error light. So that's how that works. That explains the lights on the front. Now let's go into a little bit more detail here. First of all, I'm mounting it. You put it in the box. This thing will mount inside of a normal junction box. A normal 4 and 11/16 junction box. Some people are a little confused, but look, it really is a normal box. See? It's a normal box. And the reason I'm mentioning that for mounting is because it looks a little unusual. You see it has 2 screws, and it has 2 screws at the top, and it has little latches here. Well, these little latch holes at the bottom are actually designed, if you look right here, to fit right into these holes. See it? So they go right in and close perfectly in the box. So you can mount this thing right next to your breaker box and run the lines right in. Okay? I'm going to go in later in the video where to hook it up in the breaker box and everything. But real quick, the simple thing is how you hook it up. All you have to do, and this will work out of the box, is your white goes to neutral. Hook it up first so you don't blow the unit out. White goes to neutral, and then there's 3 legs here. And you can notice I capped off the red. Now the reason I capped the red off is because for most homes, you're on single split phase. You only have 2 sides, so you're going to have the black and the blue. One goes under each breaker for opposite side of the line. So across the black and blue, you should have 240 volts or 220, right? And the red, of course, you'll cap off, and the white goes to neutral. That's it. This will work that simply. That's all you have to do. Now, and by the way, with the other repeaters, that's all you can do. It either works or it doesn't. Not with this unit. I mean, the expert, Phil Kingery at Axe Solutions, I've talked to him many times, and he knows everything about this thing. I mean, you can probably tell him from this point to this point how many volts are on the board. He knows everything about it. And he'll tell you, you're still learning stuff about this and the applications for it. But it's a fantastic unit. Let's go over some of the stuff that the unit can do. Okay, first of all, there are 8 dip switches in here. Okay, and so I'm going to show you the dip switches right now. Let's see if I can get a close-up view there. See those dip switches? Now, those dip switches allow you to fine-tune this. Now, if you look in there real close, you can see that number 4 is the only one that I have on right now. Number 4 is the most useful one. When you get it, that's all it's going to be on it when you get it, because 4 is the only one you need. When 4 is on, this runs for single or split phase, which are where most homes are. And if you read across both legs in your home, you will find out you either have 220 volts or 240 volts. If you have 208 volts, you're on a 3-phase system. Even if you only have 2 legs, it's still a 3-phase system, right? So if it's 3-phase, if you have 3 legs, that switch stays off. This unit functions as a 3-phase unit, or it functions as the single split phase unit, either one, okay? So for all practical purposes, we keep 4 on when we ship it to you. Just cap off the red wire, put them in the box, and it works fine. So what about the other switches? Oh, there's a host of things that they do, and I want to cover all those a little bit later in the video as well, but we're going to wait on that just a little bit. Right now, I want to explain about how you can use more than one of these, because you won't need this, but you probably won't need it, but this is the magic of the unit that I love. Inside these, there is a little 2-conductor plug. You see it right there. It's a little 2-conductor plug, and that's called the SCC, the signal carrying conductor. Now you don't need that normally, but that you can actually put a regular twisted pair on there, a small wire. It only passes a couple of volts of the 120 kilohertz X10 signal, which is broadcasted, at the 0%, right after the 0% of the sine wave. But if you connect that from one of these to another one of these, whatever one of them sees, not only will it retransmit on this one, but it'll actually send it over to this unit as well and do the same thing here. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. In the shopping malls, how did we use this? We'd have entrances coming from different sides of the mall on totally different transformers, right? So this goes in one box, this goes in another box, and we just run the 2-conductor wire across, and whatever one sees, totally the other one does the same thing. If you had a garage, for example, on a separate transformer, right? How do you deal with that in your home? Well, it's simple with these. You put one down in the garage and one here and run a twisted pair conductor. It doesn't even need to be in a conduit to the other unit connecting them. Now the dip switches allow you to customize how that works. One doesn't even need to repeat. The other one does. There's all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to cover that first because it's such a fantastic feature, the things you can do with it. For example, if you're familiar with X10 filters, whenever we have critical situations in a home and this box has to always work no matter what, we'll put a filter on that entire box, put one of these in that box, put this on the rest of the house, and then just couple them. So the critical box always works because nothing's on it except X10 critical equipment. And then the rest of the house on its own box gets the X10 stuff, still transmits back and forth between the two boxes seamlessly, even though one is on a totally filtered bank. So it's all kinds of stuff you can do. But right now, let's go through the dip switches, okay? Okay. Well, you know what? I didn't do the dip switches. Well, you know what? We can go to, instead of going to the dip switches, why don't I talk about placement in the box, since we brought that up, okay? Let's go for placement in the box first. And I'll got all my shortcuts marked here. So, as you can see, we have a box here. Now, this will work right out of the box. So all you really have to do is, put your 4 and 11/16 box out here, right? Yours will be square. Put the repeater in here and run this in, hook up your neutral to your bar, and then you would put these one on, right? You just put your hots, one on each line, and that's all you have to do to hook it up. Now, let me tell you some tips and tricks. You may not need to buy this. I might be able to help you fix your X10 problems right now, okay, without even buying the thing. Let's say that your transmitter from your living room, let's just say you're having a problem right now with the pole lamp coming on, okay? Let's say this is your pole lamp outside, okay? All right, and let's say it's on this breaker right here, okay? And let's say that your transmitter in your bedroom, let's say you have a maxi controller, right, or a timer, is on this breaker right here, okay? If you don't get anything else from this video, the biggest thing I'd like you to walk away with is the fact that move the positions around in your breaker box. It can make a tremendous difference on the effectiveness. Actually, it will. It'll totally change everything. A lot of electricians can't wrap their mind around the fact that X10 signals do not operate the same way as a 60 cycle power signal does. It's just like when you put the surge protector in. The instructions say don't bend the wires, avoid 90-degree bends, it slows the signal down. A lot of people find that hard to grasp, but if you put the repeater down here, it's going to repeat your signals in your home to 5,000 millivolts, right? We already covered that. But do you know at the top of the box you're not going to have 5,000? You're not going to have it. You might only have 10% of that. But 10% is okay because it works. It's all you need. As long as you have over 100 millivolt, right? At the top, everything's going to work. So, but even though this is connected on a giant bar, how can you have 5,000 millivolts here and not even enough on some of these? Well, there are things that drag the system down. There's all kinds of different things that cause interference. We're going to try to hit some of those in the video if I have time to. But as far as placement, if your transmitter is right here, I'm trying to stay focused, and it's on this breaker, we know you have a good signal right here. We know that. So I would not put your repeater on that right there. Now, if you would decide to go, hook up a capacitor, just to try to hook up a capacitor across the leg, you could try, putting your capacitor right here. But do not use a capacitor with the repeater. Because remember, if you use a capacitor, you'll put a mirror image over there, whereas a repeater will put the correct one, so you'll be working against yourself. Which brings up another point. A lot of the couplers that you'll buy there, they're not all, I want to be fair to them. Some of the couplers don't just have a little capacitor in them. Some of the couplers actually have a filter circuit. And the filter circuit, well, let's see. A filter circuit will only allow, it's still a coupler, it doesn't make anything new, and it's still a mirror image, but it's only going to allow that particular X10 frequency to get through. Does that make sense? Okay? So, but the point is, you never want a coupler installed on your own. If you had a coupler and it worked for a while, now you're going to upgrade to a repeater, you have to get rid of the coupler. Very few exceptions when you can use it. If you had a sub panel far away and there's a real weak X10 signal and you just want to couple one over to the other side, you can experiment with it. It may work, but you know, don't start off that way. You know, start off with just your repeater. A good repeater will solve everything. But let's go back to our example here for placement here. So since we know we got a great signal right there on that line, I would put your repeater somewhere a little ways away, you know, maybe to the end of the box, like down here, right? But if this side is weak up here, you might want to end up moving the repeater to the middle of the box and putting your controller down at the bottom. Does that make sense? Transmitters. Now, let's just say that everything you do here, let's just say you're not buying this. You're not buying the repeater, right? And you have a problem getting that pole lamp on. How do you troubleshoot that? Well, the easiest way to troubleshoot it is find a time when it's not working. Say, look, it's not working right now. And now turn off a breaker. A different breaker, not hooked up to the load in the transmitter. See if it works now. Turn off another breaker. See if it works now. Turn off another breaker. Eventually, you're going to turn off a breaker and it's going to start working again. You want to flag that breaker. Aha, something's on there blogging that one down, right? So now leave that breaker off and start turning the other ones on that you turned off. See if it's only that breaker that gets it past the tipping point. Because remember, you probably don't have one major thing. Now you may. There are several things that cause, you know, X10 cause noise. What causes noise? I say switching power supplies are first. By far, switching power supplies, but not everything has them. In the early 80s, when I started out in this business, nothing had a switching power supply. If you had a 5 amp supply, it was heavy, right? Now your laptop has it. Your TVs have switching power supplies, right? Aside from switching power supplies, fluorescent lights, the ballast. If you have a lamp module, a regular lamp module, or I'm sorry, even an appliance module running a fluorescent light, and you have the appliance module off, the little bit of voltage that trickles through, going through the ballast, can cause interference, even though it's off. So you got to unplug them to test it. You can't do it. So especially lots of fluorescent lights, or if you have one with a bad ballast. We just were called to a service call recently. A place has been working great for years, and nothing was working. The fluorescent light was working, but there's a whole bank of 60 fluorescent lights, and one of them, it's lighting too. It's even working. But you know what? When it's on, nothing works in the building. It was a ballast. So fluorescent lights are good, but CFL lights and LED lights. Now, why? Because some of the switching power supplies to some of them. So, but again, some of them work great and some of them don't. So you got to experiment with them and see which ones do. Now, some things, let me shut off the screen. The best stuff to go with is, I shouldn't say the best stuff. Let me explain this better. If something's real noisy, you'll know as soon as you plug it in what it is. Some computers, power supplies, oh, UPSs, notorious. UPSs are bad. Now, filters. You know, this is the XPPF filter, right? The little plug-in filter. And these little XPF filters, XPPF, sorry, XPPF is the plug-in one. They're rated at 5 amps, and you just plug these in, and whatever you plug into the back end is filtered. So if you have something noisy, you can plug it into this. Now, these are rated 5 amps, but it works phenomenally well. To give you an example, if I plug an appliance module into the back of this and plug a light into it, I can't turn that off and on, even if I have an X10 controller plugged right into the outlet here. And it works both ways. If I plug a Palm controller or any kind of a controller, a Maxi controller, into the receptacle here, nothing will go through. It's an excellent filter for X10. It's only rated 5 amps and it's not fused. If you Google these, you'll see people catching them on fire. I know a family that had these and put it on an outlet strip in the kitchen or one of the rooms in the house, and someone plugged an iron into it, and halfway through ironing, you know, this thing just starts smoking. So it's a 5 amp choke. So if you need more power, you can buy the XPF. This is my favorite one. This one is a 20 amp filter, okay? So it filters the whole thing, and you can use two to do 220 volts. So we put these in junction boxes and do the whole panel. I'll give you an example when this is nice. If you find out all your noisy items, find out everything that's noisy, or certain circuits in your house that, for example, don't have any X10 stuff on it. Group those all together and put them on an XPF you got one filter. So anything making noise on that line can't get back through to bother you in the home. It just can't bother you, right? It's not there, so you don't have to worry about it. But I'll be honest with you, the Cr134 repeater, it's going to solve these issues for you. Unless you have something that has a lot of noise. This is so effective. You really have to do all this tweaking over here if you're using a regular repeater. If you have one now and you do all this experimenting, you may be able to get it working satisfactorily. But nothing works as great as this thing. I just love it. I mean, we bought, I think the last 150 units. These, I think we have the last ones made of these ACT units, and we sell them. We sell lots of them, and we also install them at our installations. A lot of people say the X10's out of the way now. Even Phil. I mean, Phil's a great guy, but you know they stopped. They're getting out of the whole X10 business. They just, you know, because it's going the way he says of the 8-track tapes and that. Well, we're putting up new birthday party chains right now, and we're installing X10 as a part of it. There's other companies still making a lot of X10 stuff. But I'll tell you, presently, the ACT Corporation's receivers are my best. As soon as I heard that they were going to stop making them, we bought like the last 150 units. So to add them to our inventory. So we have a lot of these things and we sell them, but nothing comes close to these things. They're just fantastic. They just really did their homework building the things. And they make about 10 different repeaters. So they make the ones that, we don't sell the ones that work overseas, but they have the 50 cycle ones, the ones for Canada, they have everything. But the ones we sell are for United States, you know, 60 cycle, 3-phase and split phase. Going back here, hopefully this helps you out a little bit, giving you some ideas where to put things in the box. But where would you do the repeater? Let's say, we should cover this real quick, because some of you have multiple boxes in your home, right? And I know I got to get to those dip switches. I wanted to cover that. Well, you know what? Why don't I tell you a few of the dip switches real quick before we go to the boxes? Because some of you may be getting tired of watching the video. So let's go over a couple of the dip switches first. And again, yeah, you'll remember what the dip switches look like, right? They're right in the corner over there. They're right in the corner of the box. And when I send it to you, you're only going to have 4 of these on. And only number 4 is going to be on. Everything else needs to be off, okay? What's dip switch 1 do? That's the, when it's off, the way we send it to you, it works normally. But when dip switch number 1 is on, it gives priority to the SCC. What do I mean by that? Remember those the two conductor twisted pair? It gives priority to that. So if you're not using that, that doesn't apply anyway. So you don't got to worry about that. Switch number 5, along with number 8. 5 is one of the 2 most complex options, okay? When it's off, the repeater will accept any data frame which begins with the start code 1110, the bit sequence. Now, in most cases, this is a superior method of decoding X10 data frames, okay? Now, it also looks for the 120 kilohertz pulse, which are about 1 millisecond in duration. However, okay, now there are some conditions and some people that make modules, I'm not sure if it was a Leviton or some other ones, they don't quite live up to the correct standards. So turning this switch on, number 5, okay, the repeater uses a smaller receive window. It reduces it from 1 millisecond to 0.6 milliseconds. Now this is often advantageous in situations where the sine wave is distorted or there are other unusual installation conditions. Also, along the change, aside from just changing the receive window, turning on switch number 5 also invokes a start code filter. Now see, technically the published X10 protocol specifies that a valid X10 code needs to start with 1110, okay, and it must be preceded by the start of a message of 6 binary zeros. Now with this dip switch on, it requires that start code on the power line, and it must be preceded by the 4 bits of silence. So this is the field installer's choice, and sometimes one works better than the other. So I just figured I'd give you more details there. Now switch number 8, for example, it's the other complex option. Unlike the other company's X10 compatible products, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, that look for the presence of a signal above or in greater amplitude than the background noise, these ACT units instead use a sophisticated method which can find the presence of a signal by mapping the background noise as a baseline and then looking for the hidden signal in the noise. But however, depending on the nature of the noise, its frequency, bandwidth, amplitude, and cyclic nature, the algorithm may occasionally be too sensitive. Therefore, the dip switch is there so that you can allow the user to reduce the sensitivity by turning it on. So, but you know, that's what you got to do. You got to experiment with it, but leave it off to begin with so you can, you know, tell the difference. Other than that, everything else. So one of the other questions about dip switch 2 that would have a lot. When it's off, the repeater requires a signal at 0 degrees on the sine wave, which is of course normal. That's where it's supposed to be, right? So, but when it's on, the repeater will deliberately ignore all the signals at 0. okay, and look for signals at 30 degree, okay? Now you won't need that, okay? You probably won't, okay? But an example of when you would need this would be, for example, a delta transformer system. There's an inherent 30 degree shift in the sine wave. So any original signal which is referenced to one side of the transformer, say on a 277 volt leg, and then that signal is coupled to a repeater which resides on the other side of the transformer, say 120 volt leg, the signal would never be seen on that receiver because the signal arrives at the wrong time on that sine wave. So with dip switch 2 on, the repeater would be able to see those signals. So again, you normally would keep that off. If you're getting a lot of interference and this is repeating too much stuff, you can play with switches 5 and 8. 8 is sensitivity. Off is normal sensitivity, and on is a lower sensitivity. But 5 is the window size, and it's a very, very different thing. Switch 7 retransmits when it's off at 0 degrees and 30 degrees. And if it's on, it only retransmits a signal at 0 degrees. The only way another repeater can tell the difference between an original signal and a repeated signal is the presence of that 30 degree pulse. So if it's not there, the other repeater would assume the signal to be original. Now it is rare that you would want a repeater to send out a signal that masquerades as an original signal, but sometimes it's appropriate. If you need that, dip switch should be on, and it can do that. 3, it repeats everything if the switch is off. If dip switch 3 is off, it's going to repeat every signal it sees. If dip switch 3 is on, it doesn't repeat repeated signals. So for example, let's just say you already bought this smart home repeater, or you bought this cheap $80 repeater to see if it'll work. They actually look at the 0 frequency and it reproduces it. So if you switch on this unit, if you buy this one later, and dip switch number 3 you turn on, if it sees anything broadcasted at the 30 degree mark, it knows it's a repeated signal and it won't broadcast it. Without that option, you couldn't have 2 repeaters because they'd keep repeating forever. So this gives you a lot of flexibility, being able to skip repeated signals. And by the way, there's a jumper on the board as well, but a lot of people don't notice the jumper. The jumper's right there. And the jumper does the same thing basically that, it only applies to the SCC lines. If it's jumped, the SCC always repeats repeated signals, and if it's open, it only repeats the current signals. But that applies to the SCC, whereas switch 3 applies to the power line. Well, by the way, switch 6, when switch 6 is off, it repeats everything just like I explained to you. But if you turn switch on, it doesn't repeat onto the power lines. Well, why would you want to do that? Effectively, it would make this useless, right? But if you have 2 units in operation, if you have 2 of these running side by side, if you only wanted, for example, to copy what's here, sending it to another building, and I'm not worried about things coming back and repeating here, I can turn switch 6 on, and it'll just transmit whatever it sees out those SCC lines to connect to the other units out there, okay? So that's what that does. So let's go back to the panels right now, okay? What do you do if this is your main panel for your home, right? And this is your main, and you have a sub panel over here, okay? So this runs off here. Where do you put the your receiver? Well, what if you have another sub panel over here? Well, you put your repeater on this panel, right? I would even put, I'd put these things next to each other to try to balance it, on the bar right across. I'd put one right across from the other one, or at least put them close on there. But put your repeater on this one. Now, what other options do you have that you could experiment with? That's probably going to solve your problem, putting one repeater there with 2 of them. But we've already put a repeater on this side, a repeater on this side, and then ran the SCC lines together, connecting to solve it that way, because you can turn switch 3 off, not to repeat the repeated signal, so they're not bouncing back and forth. And by the way, I did mention this briefly about the DIM, but these units I think only take 2.7 milliseconds to analyze the DIM signals, and they don't just repeat it exactly as it sees it. It uses them, I don't know if it's an intelligent algorithm or something, but the regular repeaters that you buy, whether it's the smart home ones, they don't work nearly as well, especially with dim and bright. Sometimes you hit dim and it'll dim down way too far, because the dim, you can only hit on once. If you hit A1 on and then the repeater sends an extra on, it doesn't matter if it's only on. You can't turn it on an extra time, it's already on. But dim doesn't work that way. If you hit A1 and hit dim, and the module sees the dim signal, and then the repeater sends another dim signal, it went down twice, right? So it can cause a lot of problems, but it's not an issue with the repeater that we're selling here. It's one of those things that you just don't got to take an issue with. And Phil explains it on the ACT website very well how it does that, but they just do a great, and the fact that it does that without a perceived delay is amazing to me. It's just fantastic, because nobody wants to install a repeater and then have their performance, what they're used to their X10 system working, how it works. I mean, you won't notice a difference in performance installing this thing. So let's give a different example here. Let's just say, I'm always losing my erasers. Here's one. Let's say that you have 3 panels, but let's say, for example, here's panel 1, here's panel 2, and here's panel 3, and the line comes in from the pole here, right? And then you go into this one and goes into here. Where would you put the repeater there? Right, put it in the middle box, right? The middle would be the best bet, because whatever it sees from here, as long as it gets at least 25 millivolts, it'll send 5,000 more out, right? So transmitters over here and transmitters here, or receivers on each side, this will boost to go the other way. So you can probably get by with just using one unit without any problems at all. Well, one thing, dip switch number 4. Dip switch number 4. You have to make sure that you have that done properly. Now, most of the time it's easy to tell. Most homes are on a split phase or a single phase, right? So dip switch 4 will be on. But there are some situations, for example, in some condos and apartments, where there'll be 3 apartments, but you'll have a regular breaker box, and it looks like there's just, split legs in there. But it'll actually be 3-phase coming in. And they will run phases A and B to the first apartment, B and C to the second apartment, and C and A to the third. Okay, but so dip switch 4 would have to be off. So even though just at first glance, sometimes they use normal panels. So even though at first glance, it looks like it's just a single, it looks like it's a single split phase, it's actually 3-phase. So an easiest way to tell, what I do to make sure, is I just put a voltmeter across both legs. And if there's 208 volts, I know switch 4 has to be off. That's a 3-phase, right? But if I get 240 or 220, right, then switch 4 has to be on. Okay, so if you're not sure, switch 4 is on. That's very rare that it happens, but I have seen it, and I give credit to Phil Kingery again at ACT for bringing that up, and that's a great point. So that's pretty much it. I think I answered all the questions in this video. There's not a lot of detail on the AT004, the tester unit. It's a fantastic tester unit, but you probably won't need it. I would use the repeater. The repeater is a great thing, the Cr134, and of course you can buy that right on at the private-ebay.com site. Send me an email if you have any questions, or you can probably buy it on our BizTech Business Solutions website as well. But this tester here is a fantastic tool. I don't know how many we have left in stock, because we bought the last ones of these as well, but we didn't buy as many as the repeaters because these we don't install all the time. But we use them. They're great units. You can actually set the strength of how strong you want to transmit on these. So you can keep lowering the strength. Try transmitting at this level, transmit a little bit lower, transmit at this level. And these also work right out of the box. If you just take this out of the box, this repeater, and this test equipment, the AT004, and you just plug it into a receptacle, it immediately shows you on the screen the millivolt level of noise on the line. So it's great for just plugging in different receptacles. If you just want to know how noisy a device is, plug it into a receptacle and then plug the devices in one after the next right on top of it. It'll show you the millivolts of how noisy it is, right? So it'll also show you the signal strength of the X10 in the home. So, and it shows what's being transmitted. So if I just plug it in and look at the screen, I can see X10 signals. I see someone set a P1 on. And it also has a log. You can let this run for 24 hours straight. Go home, put it in the client's home, or put it in your own home. Come back tomorrow, and it'll have the date and times for every X10 that it captured, right? I mean, how useful was that with the signal strength? So it's really useful. You can log noise, you can log the frames, noise data, signal data, frame details. It's really versatile. I don't know if you can see the keypad on there, but what it allows you to do is, it's just as the ACT built that thing. It absolutely is the best tester. There are lots of different testers out there, but this one does it all. If you know how sometimes you need 2 people, one to transmit, one to walk around the house checking. This will do both. You can just program this to continuously send P1 on, P1 off. So you plug that in, and then you take your second unit, or module if you don't have a second unit, and go around and just making sure you can hear everything and see what works, you know? So you can actually plug this into a troubled location and have it transmit, and go around the house with a module and plug it in. You'll hear it clicking off and on, knowing that it works there, go to a different location. It's just so useful to have something like that. But by far the best thing is that it shows you the noise level, and it does that out of the box. Because you really take some studying to learn how to do all the complex stuff. I mean, it does everything, but to be honest with you, 95% of all the trouble things that we troubleshoot using the AT004, we don't use any of that. We just want to see the noise level and see how much noise is on the line. And if it's not noisy, we know we can solve it easily with a cheap repeater, or, you know, sometimes even the cap. So, but fantastic unit, fantastic unit. So, well, hope answered all your questions. Shoot me an email if you have any other questions. My name is Ken, and it's been a pleasure, and I wish you the best.